We're talking Final Destination on Gene and Roger Talk Movies today, one of a series of Final Destination films, but we're talking about the very first one. Came out in 2000. You've got Devon Sawa, who was kind of a big deal back then, and then
Tony Todd.
Tony
makes
Todd,
a
of
cameo,
course.
which you gotta love.
Yep, absolutely.
Tony Todd.
Absolutely. And Ollie Larter is in this as well.
Yeah, her big breakout role for sure.
Yeah.
And I think she was in Heroes, wasn't she? Big star in Heroes.
I don't know anything about that. I do know she was in Final Destination 2.
Oh, yeah, barely. Barely. I remember watching that movie, yeah.
But let's see if Gene hates this one. Gene, where are you at with this one?
Oh, my Lord. This is a movie that I remember watching it in 2000, going to the movie theater, blah, blah, blah. I have kind of like, I wouldn't say fond memories of it, but I didn't hate it. But I watched the thing last night, right? 2000, easy math, 24 years later. And dear Lord, I despise this thing.
Oh, no, no, Gene.
The whole movie is just beautiful teenagers getting whacked. That's all this movie is. And it's just, none of the characters are really likable. I mean, Allie Larter's kind of likable, but I mean, you're not rooting for really any of them. And some of them, they behave in such, they're acting like sub kindergartners. You know, it's like getting in fights in a plane, at the airport, and I mean, like, trying to punch each other, and you know, these two teens just like making out right there in the terminal. And it's what?
Oh no, that's very much teen behavior right there.
You know, I've been to a lot of airports, and you know something, I've never seen that.
I have, and I see it just driving in today. I see it on the side of the street there.
You saw two people totally making out,
totally having a good time.
You were in your car, and they're just like, ooh, right there.
Yeah. They might have been homeless people, but I don't know.
I have never.
Yeah.
You hang out in a different part of the city that I do. I never see that.
How many times? Well,
never.
How many times have you had to kick kids out of here for being a little too intimate with each other?
Never.
Never? Really?
Never.
All right. Well, anyway.
You hang out with a different crowd than I do.
Well, at-risk youth, baby.
I don't know what to say about that, but this movie is just, it's just, the movie producers kind of like, they put together, oh, you cheated death, and, you know, and the protagonist kind of cheats death, and, you know, by the second act, he figures out death's plan. And then, of course, death is kind of an entity. Like, there's one scene where this one young kid is killed in the most ridiculous way. Like, water starts dripping from from the water feed to the toilet, right? And then the water has like a conscious. It follows a path so that it makes him trip. And then after he trips and goes into this convoluted choking scene, which would never happen, then the water, you see it retreating and going back to where it was. So it's like it accomplished its purpose, it did its deed, and then it went back to where it was. So it's definitely is imbued with some kind of force. And I think if this movie had got into a little more of that, showing the purposefulness and that death is kind of an actual entity that can go after you rather than just random killings. And another kid is killed, and I remember seeing this from 2000. They stopped at this train tracks, right? This one kid wanted to kill himself, and the protagonist saves him at the last second from an oncoming train. Anyway, they're standing by the onrushing train, and then some piece of metal is kicked up by the train, which, again, doesn't happen. And then the train, then this piece of metal flies through the air and cuts the kid's head off. You know, it's just like, that's just like, this is like random stuff. A woman she has a teen attitude, girl, and she walks away in her huff. Of course, she doesn't look two ways before crossing the street, and a bus just whacks her. But, you know, if they had been more purposeful and deliberate, again, about the perniciousness and the way that death is just like always stalking you, and it's a thing. If they'd gone more into that, this movie would have been a much better movie. But looking back, and when it came out 2000, like I said, did I hate it? No, it's a different part of my life. maybe I had more empathy or for people of that age. But looking back now, it's just like this movie is just garbage. But did it make a box office bank? Yes, it did. For New Line Cinema, yes, it did. It launched Ali Larter to fame, and so I don't know. Would I recommend it now? No. Like, would I? No. I'm not
Gene.
Well, Roger, you like this thing?
This movie is awesome.
It is not awesome. Roger.
Awesome. The only thing that
garbage.
No, God, no. Here's the things I really love about it. One,
what?
The elaborate death sequences are. I just love that. And of course, as
she just walked the scene with attitude. Just
that was a great.
She just walks and boom.
That was great.
And then
showing,
everyone's blood splattered.
That was great, showing just the suddenness of death. There's this underlying theme playing throughout this whole thing about the inescapability of death, and now you've got these teens trying to figure out a way to stop this process from happening.
Right. The protagonist cheats it at the airport because he gets off the plane.
Right. It has this, if you're at all afraid of flying, it has a beautiful opening sequence of here's what it might look like if you were on a plane that was going down. And then he has this premonition and he's like, oh, okay, we got to get off this plane. A couple kids follow him. But the idea was
so convincing. And that's when Ali Larter. Her name's Clear?
Clear, right.
Clear? Who names their kid Clear?
Well, I would assume the parents that were raising her because,
yes, of course the parents named her.
She's all on her own here in this movie because the father had died and then the mother had hooked up with some other person and kicked her out.
Like a teen with
but still going to school.
Tough upbringing.
So good for her. But it's got this really elaborate plane crash sequence at the beginning, which is great. He's convinced he's gotten off the plane and these other teens had followed him.
Alex.
There was a lot of, I liked how the brothers, because one of the brothers goes after Alex when he's freaking out on the plane and to get off. And the other brother tells him, hey, no, you go, I'll just stay here. And so there's a lot of remorse or guilt about that brother having left his other brother behind. The teachers that decided which one is going to go back on the plane because they're only going to let one of us on because of this issue and one of us has to stay. She tells that other teacher, no, you go ahead. I'll just catch up later on the next flight. She's got tremendous guilt there. So I loved that part where you're always thinking about, is there something I could have done differently or should it have been me instead? So that's a real thing going on there. And I also liked the Tony Todd character. Again, he's only in one scene.
Tony Todd, he's great.
His dialogue sequence there, he's this mortician, or maybe he's something more than that. But they break in to kind of find their friend Todd to see, because the police are thinking it was or the father is thinking it's a suicide, and Alex is like, there's no way, we just talked. He said, we're going to get together and do all this stuff. I can't imagine he would commit suicide. So they break into the mortuary. Tony Todd just kind of appears. He's lurking in there or whatever.
He's finishing up the procedure.
Right. And there's this nice dialogue sequence which really lays out, how you can do everything right and still die. And there's lots of other dialogue in here that is talking about you just wake up in the morning and you assume your day is going to be like every other, and then something terrible happens to you and you die. And so it's got this really nice overlay of, death is a real thing. It's going to happen to all of us. There's no way to escape it. And in the Final Destination movies, you never escape. And I just really liked that part of it. I think Final Destination 1 has maybe a better reputation than it maybe should because of the more elaborate craziness in the other episodes of the Final Destination series. But
I don't know if I'd buy that.
I love
the death scenes in like Final Destination 2 are just like, come on.
Oh my God, Gene.
Come on. There's this sequence where the dude's making hamburgers on his grill and the grill explodes and then his leg falls on the table. It's just like pure
beautiful
comedy, shock value.
Mm-hmm.
Another guy, he buys us a new Apple computer and then he ends up, I forget how he dies, but he's like sticking his hand into the disposal and you're just like, don't do that, and then he ends up dying somehow.
Right, and
I think doesn't he
that's
to
the
fall
great
off
thing.
the building or something?
Right, and then the ladder comes jutting
Yeah,
down
yeah,
and
it gets
smashes
his,
through
right
him.
in his
Right,
eye.
and so it gets more
eye socket,
elaborate,
yeah.
and it gets the audience going, well, how is this person going to die? And they have all these nice setups.
It's just a silly little
And they
game,
touched
yeah.
on it a little bit in this one with the Todd character in the bathroom where the water's slowly trying to get him, and he's plugging in that radio and all this stuff, and then he gets killed in the weird way that he does. But it's just, I really like this film, and I also like...
No, you don't really like it.
I do.
No,
I
you
do.
don't. There's
Gene,
something in you that
there's
just...
something wrong
it's
with
making
you sometimes.
think these things, but if you really examine your feelings deep in your heart, you will see it my way.
I will not. I just think this movie is maybe smarter than your usual teen slaughterfest because of the things I said about the ruminations.
Good-looking teens, and plus
on the finality of death.
I've seen lots of teens. Teens do not look this good. I'm sorry, teenagers. You do not look this good. I mean, some of you, but some adults look good. Lots of adults. I mean, come on. You know, they're fat and ugly and their hair's all messed up. No, every teen in this movie. It blows my mind. The protagonist also, Alex, I think. There's this one scene. He's hanging out with his dad. He's just not doing anything. And he's just hanging out in his house to be safe. And, dude, his hair is, like, perfect. It's like, you know, he just came off the wardrobe table, you know, we can tell. But, dude, what teen is like that? And I live with teens. Oh, they are a mess.
So like, Gene, you dislike Final Destination because the teens are not accurately portrayed?
It's just, like, ridiculous. It's like, come on. And then just that whole Tony Todd thing, which is my favorite scene in the whole, because it's so creepy and he lays it out. But again, the premise is just ridiculous. Like the teens break into the mortuary late at night. Tony Todd, the undertaker, the guy doing the embalming procedure, sees them. And they just have a nice little conversation. There's no like, what the hell are you doing here? Get out. I'm calling the police. They're breaking and entering. But no, they just have a nice little conversation. They were good. Tony Todd scares them.
Well, but the idea behind that character, there's thoughts that character actually is the visual incarnation of the Grim Reaper, right? And that's why he was saying things like, I'll see you soon. He was almost kind of taunting him that, you got to figure out the game. You got to figure out the stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and so he's kind of like playing a little game there with him. Now, it could have been, I'll see you soon because I'm a mortician, and at some point
I took it that way because, you know, we all die and a lot of people go to morticians.
But because
I'm not going to go to a mortician. I want my wife just to put me in the cremation thing and then just get my ashes, throw them in the ocean.
Okay, well,
that's what I want.
All right, well, Gene, it's on tape now forever. So we'll make sure if there's any dispute as to how you want to go, we'll just play this episode back.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
but I think the taunting nature of that and how Tony Todd is explaining, you know, you're trying desperately to figure out the game here or the pattern that's going on, and you think you can cheat death and all this. And so I really liked that scene, and I just like that tone overall where even though you do everything right, you're still going to end up in that casket at the end. Yeah. And I really like that part. I also like the Ollie Larter character. I thought I'm glad that she made an appearance in the second one.
Very much at the end.
Because she's definitely an interesting character because she's like almost an empath because she's like, I don't even know who you are really, Alex. We've gone to school together the whole time, but we've never talked. But I can feel you on this plane when you were going through your thing, and just how that's going on. And then Alex, of course, continues to develop these psychic powers or whatever they are because he keeps getting flashes of a train or a bus, and then something terrible happens, and so he starts to figure out what's going on.
Right, he has, before somebody dies, he has a premonition, Before, like, even the attitude girl gets whacked by the bus, he sees a bus.
Right, yeah. And so I like that. One thing I know Gene is really not a fan of this movie now for some reason, even though he was 24 years ago.
No, I wasn't really a fan. Let me just say I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it, but 24 years later, now I hate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you aware that there was a different ending originally? So
Tell me about the alternate ending.
There's an entire
Because
subplot.
now they're in Paris. The 3 survivors are in Paris,
Right.
but one of them, the aggressor guy, he ends up getting
Right. They realize that they haven't actually cheated death as much as they thought, and you haven't won. But the original ending, there was a whole subplot going on throughout this where actually the Alex and Clear character developed a much closer, more intimate relationship, and she ends up getting pregnant. And at the end of the film, when he's sacrificing himself, it was partially because she's with his child now, and they had figured out that she is going to be safe because she's bringing new life into the world. And that's actually what stops it. So that the end of the film is actually her baby, and then that bully kid meeting at that memorial where they have a conversation.
Right.
Then they have just this really mellow conversation about.
How do you know all this?
Because it's actually, you can look it up, but I also on the ridiculous out-of-print special edition DVD from way back in the day, they had that. They had that whole sequence on there. And so there's 3...
So I can't get this DVD anymore.
There's 3 deleted scenes on there, which are that whole subplot of the...
See, they should have kept that in there.
Because it's much quieter end, and it fits better with the overall theme of the film where... the sadness of death, the loss, all of this stuff. And it works a lot better, in my opinion, even though the flashy ending where we didn't win and all this craziness
the bully
is going
character
on,
gets killed.
It allows for a more horror ending. But this was more of an ending where, yep, we got through it, bringing in new life, because she was safe because the baby was not in the plan. And so she got to...
But he was Alex was sacrificing himself.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing if you have that DVD, or you can probably see it on YouTube. I'm sure they've got
just
it there.
YouTube probably. But
definitely interesting
alternate ending.
Yeah, definitely brings about a different closure to this film because, of course, the way it is now, it's just hoping for more.
Yeah,
more of
it's
this.
just like a. It's like those shock scares kind of. It's just one of those scary. Scary endings,
which I'm okay with. It's fine, it's a teen horror film, and you're gonna have that, and it just leads to Final Destination 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, there are other movies that play off this theme about death. I remember when I lived in LA, I also watched The Time Machine Part 2. It came out. It was kind of cool. A friend of mine an LA friend of mine was actually an extra in The Time Machine Part 2. I don't know. I had some friends that were extras. They kind of figured it out. Like I had a friend that was an extra on Friends, and he says, "Oh yeah, I was on the set of Friends, and like the actors, the big stars of all of them, they were just right there. I could reach out and touch them, but they're given instructions not to talk to them.
Right.
So, but that's a total
lowly
aside.
extras don't talk to the star.
Lowly extras, you're an extra. You're a set piece. Don't you dare talk. Yeah. But yeah, so I watched Time Machine 2, and the premise of that movie was the inventor of the time machine. His wife dies in this robbery in a park. He invents the time machine. His goal is to go back in time and save her. And so he goes back in time, and he does save her. But then she dies in an accident on a carriage, and then he goes back in time and saves her from the accident on the carriage. But then she dies. So it's like, once death is determined to get you, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You can't cheat it. So I like, we're talking about a different movie now, but I think in a way that movie definitely has its flaws for sure. But I really like the premise of that movie is that, once death has put its sights on you, then, you can go to extraordinary measures, but you're not going to save yourself.
Right.
But ultimately, death has its sights on all of us, right?
Right. Yeah. Death is going to win no matter what you try.
But, it's just like...
You just don't want to die today.
Yeah. I mean, they're heavier themes here. It's like, death is really just a part of life. I think in our American culture, we've tried to isolate ourselves from death, and we've made it a foreign thing, which I think is too bad. And we maybe exacerbate the stress and the maybe even the horror of death when it actually comes and visits us, either through a loved one or, well, when we die, we don't care, but especially through a loved one. But I think for society, maybe it was a little bit more, embracing of a part of life that, because it's a part of life. It's inescapable. We'll all go through it. And so, but we've really tried to, push it so we don't deal with it.
Gene getting all philosophical here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think
about our little horror movie.
This movie is kind of exists because we've pushed death to the background and we try to ignore it, try to pretend it's not there.
Well, speaking of bringing death to the foreground, you are aware that Final Destination 4 and 5 were released in 3D, right? I have no comment. Yeah, so
that's a movie that will never be seen by my
both
eyes.
Of those movies are great. The 3D is beautiful.
I would just say watching Final Destination 5 would be like making me 90 minutes closer to death.
Well, and
for no good reason.
You realize there's a new one that's scheduled to come out, I think, next year. They just finished filming it. I think it's called
Final Destination Part 11?
No, I think it's like Bloodlines or something weird. I can't remember what the title is, but it's Final Destination something.
Well, even horror movies like their sequels, like there's endless Marvel movies. And I just ended up watching, Furiosa, which is like it's a prequel, which I didn't hate. It was all right. But, it's not original,
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah. So we're going to do a movie. We actually have a plan this week to do another movie because we knew we didn't know we were doing Final Destination until last night because we couldn't locate any of the other movies we had talked about on the episode last week. But Final Destination has this kind of theme of creeping doom, inescapability of your fate and all that. And so we figured, hey, a nice follow-up to this episode would be It Follows, which has similar type of stuff. So we'll be doing that next week.
Yeah, It Follows definitely a generally more creepy horror movie for sure.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how much Gene hates that one next week.
No, I've seen this movie. I like it because I think a good horror should kind of, for the lack of a better phrase, good horror should kind of mess you up a little bit. It kind of like makes you uncomfortable. Yeah, and It Follows kind of does that.
Right. So apparently our view on Final Destination is if you are much younger than Gene, 24 years younger than Gene, you might like it.
Yeah. Just figure out how old I am and then minus 24.
Or
you're okay.
I'm the same age as Eugene. I still love this movie. So I guess just take a shot and you're either going to hate it or you're going to love it.
Yeah. Well, watch it, but... Yeah, Eugene says don't watch it.
And Roger says watch it. So thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next week with It Follows.
It Follows, yeah.
So bye-bye.
Bye.